In this video, I will be giving critical analysis of Testing God, Episode 1, Killing the Creator. I will simply play the video and insert my comments. I have copied and used the Testing God episode according to fair use guidelines. So let me start the video here, playing it in its entirety, Episode 1, commenting as needed, as you will see. Here we go.
The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light."
For millennia, we accepted that our world had been created by God. Then science began to challenge this belief.
To be fobbed off with a cheap supernatural explanation that really doesn't explain anything, I think it actually is mentally degrading.
Okay, this first commenter, I believe, sounds like Richard Dawkins. He's saying it's a cheap explanation that should be disregarded because that is a non-empirical statement which has no informational value and is strictly opinion, and cheapness doesn't seem to relate at all to a mythological and or scientific explanation. And him saying it's mentally degrading is a comment that's given without any evidence or analysis of any sort, so that should be disregarded as well.
But however much science advanced, a complete explanation of creation remained elusive.
If you ask it at a very deep level, if you want to know why is the universe the way it is, we are nowhere near answering that question in science. We're no closer now than the ancient Greeks were.
In the days when creation was a mystery, belief in God gave meaning to our struggles, to our lives.
Notice he said that in the days when creation was a mystery. Of course, it's still a mystery for both science and religion. The Bible openly refers to aspects of Christ as being a mystery. The cross is a mystery. These are things that are infinite and supernatural, whereas we humans do not have infinite minds in the same way that God does. And he is correct. Religion and the mystery of God does give meaning. It's the only thing that gives any meaning. Everything else in reality is meaningless, as it says in Ecclesiastes 1 verse 2.
But was God real, or just something we had invented to cover our ignorance and ease our pain?
So Christianity is very much in agreement with the idea that humanity is writhing in misery, but does not offer anything in the world to alleviate that. And Christianity, to be clear, is specifically about achieving the joy of Christ, the ecstasy of the Lord. And to overlook that means you've overlooked the entire Bible. There's passages everywhere in the Bible about people experiencing God and attaining incredible joy. That's the whole point of Christianity. King David says in Psalm 13 verse 5, "I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation." And then here's Isaiah 6. Isaiah has a vision of the Lord in heaven. Let me just read verses 6, Isaiah 6, 1-4. "And the year King Uzzah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim, each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory.' And the posts of the doors were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke." And it goes on like that. So to say that Christianity is not aware of human misery in the world is to miss the whole point of the Bible. The New Testament is filled with people thrown in jail, tortured, crucified like Christ, Peter crucified upside down, Paul murdered, on and on and on. So when this says that we use mythology to ease our ignorance and therefore ease our pain is incorrect. The Bible is specifically saying we use experience of God to ease our pain. So there's an error made in this video there.
Or just something we had invented to cover our ignorance and ease our pain.
She is correct. There is no way to prove the non-existence of God, that it's just God is an imagination of billions of people. So I agree.
I can never prove to somebody else's satisfaction that the God that I perceive is not simply a figment of my imagination. But I personally don't believe that I have invented God.
The modern rational world finds fewer of us drawn to church, or speaking of God.
Notice in the comments just made, a number of claims exist, but no empirical evidence or logical argumentation exists to support them. Firstly, it's implied that the rational world, the people of the rational world being less interested in religion, therefore means that that Christianity is not rational and science is. There's no claim given to that, no argumentation to support that claim. And then there's the claim that that modern rational world, as it says, has fewer of us going to church or speaking about God. No data is given for that. We're left to believe the assumption that in this world, all of a sudden there are fewer people that are churchgoers or interested in Christ. That seems difficult to believe with all the hunter-gatherers and the 100 million Native Americans that were on the plains of the Americas before Columbus and so forth, that with so many non-Christians, that suddenly in the world today there are many, many fewer just because of the purported idea that science has rational analysis and no other thought in religion does. It's widely known that Christianity is the largest religion in the world by far. It's expanding all over Asia and China and Japan, all through primitive areas, third world, and so forth. But we are asked to believe on no evidence at all that the opposite is the case, that Christianity is diminishing in numbers because science has the purported rational analysis that was just mentioned. So there are two specific claims made with no evidence for them, empirical or logical, so they should be disregarded.
The modern rational world finds fewer of us drawn to church, or speaking of God. Yet a yearning for there to be a reason for our existence, out there, has never gone away.
Now the claim has just been made that religion gave us meaning, religion is fading away, but we haven't lost the desire to have know a meaning and purpose of our lives. You watch the rest of this video, they won't solve that issue and show you that science provides meaning and purpose to your life. It's sort of introduced as if that's going to happen in this video. You watching the whole video, it won't happen. And that's because there is no meaning in anything to do with science. What's the meaning of a rock? What's the meaning of the sky? What's the meaning of a piece of a computer? Nothing. These things are meaningless. Everything in the world is meaningless, as it says in Ecclesiastes 1:2, as already mentioned. The only meaning that exists is the experience of God.
If you feel the absence of God, you also feel the dark night of your soul. You listen to nothing, you see nothing, you taste nothing, you just close yourself in.
Now that's Moltmann. He's a very, very famous European theologian, wonderful writer, and he's speaking the truth here. I was an atheist, a very hardcore atheist. If you doubt that, go look in the journal Sophia in 2005, I think it was, or 6. I published an article trying to prove the non-existence of God in that philosophy journal. Very shortly after that, I started to believe in God for a number of reasons. And I will tell you, when I was an atheist, which started back in 1993. I was nothing but depressed, miserable, confused, absolutely haunted by the mystery of the finality and termination and death. And I had all kinds of problems with depression, confusion, nihilism, and I would even say problems with the spiritual war, to use Christian terminology. And what all the scientists and so forth in this video won't tell you is they're all going through the same thing. Now, I don't have evidence for that, but I'm just saying I bet you it's the case, because I taught for 13 years in universities and interacted with all kinds of atheist professors. I myself was one for a long time, and atheist students. And when there were atheists, there was depression, there was alcohol abuse, there was Prozac, there was absolute misery, emptiness, and confusion, and nihilism. So by induction, I'm saying these same people here, I think they like it that they're on the screen and they feel important, that they're giving their opinions and so forth, but what they won't tell you is that their lifestyle is associated with absolute emptiness, like Moulton was just saying. Go find an atheist. Don't listen to what they say, because they'll tell you life is great and they're filled with love and they're kind to everybody. That's what they'll tell you. Go watch their life, and you will see addiction, escapism, bouts of emptiness, confusion. You'll see gaps in the mask of their personality, where you can see their misery and their addictions. I remember when I was studying anthropology as an undergrad, the professors all drank like crazy, and they were all atheists. Why would somebody drink like crazy? Because they're trying to escape their life, because their life is misery. When I started to believe in God, I stopped drinking, and I drank heavily before that.
When you say, has science somehow removed the mystery of that? Absolutely not. You like the God problem has got pushed from one place to a deeper place.
Well, yes and no. That depends how much faith one has in science. What he's essentially saying is the discoveries of, I'm paraphrasing in my own words what I think he just said, the discoveries of science have changed the way we see the cosmos, so therefore the mystery of where God fits in has just shifted its locations from where it used to be to where it now is. Okay, if you believe all the stuff that you're hearing out of science. The theory of evolution is called the theory for a reason, because it's a theory. The Big Bang Theory is called the theory for a reason, because it's a theory. If these things were true, then sure, yeah, what Penrose just said is correct. But if they're not, then the God problem hasn't shifted at all. It's exactly where it was 2,000 years ago. So, of course, Penrose is going to talk as if all this stuff in science is just like the Big Bang is a discovery, the theory of evolution is a discovery. But see, discoveries are things we can see with our eyes, not theories that somebody thought up in a room, which is what Big Bang and evolution are. That's why they're both called theories. We don't see species, kinds change into one another. We don't see the Big Bang singularity. We see galaxies moving apart. And we see radiation in the universe. Do those automatically mean that everything came from a singularity point? No. So there's some faith that's required to hold on to those theories. Any theory involves faith, of course. Faith, not in the biblical faith. Faith in the biblical sense is the experience of God. It's a kind of knowing. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I'm God. Be still and believe that I'm God. And the faith in science is different. It's like kind of believing in Santa Claus. You have to believe something with no evidence at all, where you can't see it. At least with God, you can have inner experience of Him. It's not scientific experience, but it is nevertheless personal inner experience. That's the whole point of Christianity, as was said above.
There are no simple answers on this journey. More than 20 years ago, minister and theologian Don Cupid had a mission to explain the meaning of God in people's lives. On radio and television, he articulated a belief in God that made sense in the modern world.
I think until the 1950s and 60s, it was possible to believe that there were certain fixed certainties out there by which one could live. But cultural change since that time has gradually eroded the certainties for all of us.
Okay, what he's saying is essentially true. What he's talking about is the rise of postmodernism. Postmodernism is the idea that there is no truth, everything's relative, and that's sort of flooded society since the 1960s. And then we have the ideas, that everybody's opinion matters, that there's all different religions that should coexist, one's not more true than the other. All these kinds of things which seem kind of just everyday to us now didn't exist decades ago. So essentially what he's saying is, I agree with, from what I can tell, happened through time.
But his mission has not ended as he expected. In the last few years, he has found it impossible to reconcile his once simple faith with the rational and scientific world around him.
This is an essential point I'm about to discuss right here. You see what they just did? They just transferred discussion of God and comparing it to rational scientific analysis. And this fellow just said there's certainties about that we cannot hang on to anymore as we used to be able to decades ago. And then the narrator just moved following directly to say scientific analysis is what has disrupted those. This is a very important point, specifically because information about the world is different than information about religion. Empirical information is different than spiritual information. And what they're doing here is they're blurring the two together, and that's a fundamental error, which often is used to prop up science and take down Christianity. But it's incredibly important to note that he's talking about certainties in the world. In other words, they went from saying certainties have faded away in culture, and then the narrator said that's because of scientific analysis, so therefore they're talking about information about the world. Because if they were talking about information about the spiritual, they can't say rational scientific information has caused these certainties, which the narrator and this fellow, their conversation together, coupled together, does. And he probably won't make the distinction because God is not information about the world. I bet you he makes the move here in a second to start saying those certainties don't now apply to God as well, but specifically the certainties that faded away are about the world. The way we take in information about the world and about the spiritual realm are radically different. The world information is channeled through the senses, spiritual information is not. So therefore, certain fallible aspects of information transferred through us through the senses, which are very problematical ways to obtain information, don't exist for the spiritual, and it's much more certain information because that the representationalism of scientific analysis doesn't exist for spiritual analysis. So I bet this guy won't touch on any of that.
It's very hard to describe how one's whole system of thought gradually changes and evolves, but it does. I think many people suddenly wake up one morning and find they no longer believe some belief that's been very important to them in the past. I used to think there was reality out there, truth out there, God out there. So I saw life as a kind of dialogue between oneself and the supremely real in relation to which one lived. God was the basis on which everything else exists. God was the foundation of everything. That God is dead.
Okay, and sure enough, right there. So again, to repeat, he brings up the fact that certainties, cultural certainties about science and religion aren't firmly fixed in people's minds as they were decades ago. That's worldwide, whether you're in a rainforest, you're a hunter-gatherer rainforest, you're a Buddhist in China, or you're a Christian in America. It's true everywhere. That's what globalization is about. It's about making everything relativist. And postmodernism is about, involves postmodernism as a separate philosophy as relativism, but relativism is sort of a sub-philosophy of it. And then the narrator goes right to saying these are because of rational analysis, and then this fellow says God is dead. So all this is smearing together the acquisition of spiritual information in one's mind and the acquisition of empirical information in one's mind as if they're the same process and they're completely different. And the analysis of this video specifically is incorrect on this issue, so everything should be disregarded from what's been heard so far, unless they explain how they can say that empirical information in some way affects spiritual information, where the cognition of the two is completely different and the intake of the two is by completely different channels.
That God is dead. that God is dead.
Cupid stands in a long line of intelligent thinkers who have found traditional religious teaching coexists uneasily with scientific discovery.
I think it's undeniably true that if you look at the great revolutions in human thought, going back, say, to Copernicus, and then followed by the work of Newton and Darwin and then Einstein, each of these, in their own way, I think, has shaken the foundations of the Christian religion. I think we're talking very much in Christian terms in this discussion. I can't say for other religions, but as far as the Christian religion is concerned, which was the dominant religion in Europe where science began, it has been historically a sequence of retreats by religion in the face of scientific advance. I think it's got to the point where most people probably feel that science has won the battle, that religion has very little to offer when it comes to explaining the natural world.
Everything sounded pretty good with what Paul Davies here was saying. Again, Paul Davies is one of the most famous physicists in the world, just like Penrose, who was speaking a minute ago, is as well. But Davies now seems to be kind of on a bandwagon argument without evidence. You know, he's a little more specific, saying in Europe, the rise of Christianity is retreated, where the other fellow was saying the world. So this is at least a little more specific here. But anyway, what Davies is speaking from the perspective that he has perfect faith in the scientific theories and no faith in the Christian religion. Again, this just depends on if you believe the scientific theories or not. We've already discussed how they're not discoveries, the specific ones we brought up so far. Davies is a particle astrophysicist, and his specific area is highly theoretical. He's involved in string theory, which has absolutely no empirical evidence for it. It's just a mathematical philosophy. And also the particles that he studies are for the most part unobservable. We can see some of their effects and so forth. So he's a theoretical scientist. So I don't think he's really yearning for empirical data or experiential information, which is the true information. Theoretical information is that the human mind always gets things messed up. If we work in theoretical information, whether it's theoretical information in the spiritual realm or the physical realm, doesn't matter. We're going to mess things up in our minds. That's why it's important to rely on experiential information. And in the scientific realm, that's called empiricism, where we stick very close, glue on to repeatable sense experiences, which is not what evolution and Big Bang Theory and so forth involve. Now, this fellow Davies isn't going to point that out to you. He's just going to say that his information is the peak of information. My information's right, and other people's that disagrees is wrong. I'm the king of information, and Christianity disagrees, so it's wrong. That's what he's going to tell you. That's called the dominator paradigm. We'll see in a little while in this video that they're going to say that science is replacing religion as being the dominator paradigm, where science has taken the spot of being the information that says this human theory, this human theorizing is the top information. Others who question it are incorrect. We have the right to say our information is wrong, right, and everyone else's is wrong. That's called the dominator. In postmodern philosophy, that's called the dominator paradigm. Like Gilles Deleuze discusses that a lot. I think it is true. Science sort of is the dominator paradigm now, and religion, Christianity is less so. Thank goodness. Anyone who is strong in Christ is raging inside their heart, does not go up to a person and says, my information is correct, yours is wrong, and you're an inferior, you have an inferior mindset and paradigm as compared to me. That's what science is about. What the Christian is involved in doing is saying, hey, I don't want to win the debate against you. I don't really care about the debate against you. What can I do to serve you and show God's love to you. We don't even need to debate anything. I don't care if you're Islam or Buddhist or atheist or whatever. I'm here to serve, because the Son of Man, just like Christ, the Son of Man came to serve, not to be served. And I'll show you the existence of God through my being, if you even are interested. Only God can convert someone. All I can be is a signpost. So yes, science is a dominator paradigm. We'll come back to that topic in a little while.
Ever since science first looked at the heavens and puzzled at what lay beyond, God's unquestioned role as creator has been under attack.
If one goes back and studies the history of science, one finds out it's not simply a progression of discovery to discovery and we arrived at the theories we have today. Just like with how science is a bunch of theories today, it's been like that all along. Now, there have been discoveries, of course, but they're always squelched by theories, and then theories overtake, and then sometimes what's called science is just plain theory. So this is more of a historical issue of why he says that. And the way the history books are written allows the narrator to say what they just said there, about how ever since we started looking at the skies, we started questioning the Bible. That's a paraphrase of what he just said. Sure, if his science, what really science is the production of theory making, non-empirical theory making for the most part. So yeah, of course, in that sense, that is the case, what the narrator said. But unfortunately, it's not how history actually played out. And for example, in geology, until, 75 years or something ago, the dominating thesis was expanding Earth. And then it was replaced by plate tectonics. Now, both of those theses describe the data. The same could be said about geocentrism versus heliocentrism. Both theories describe the data. But we're told one's right and one's wrong. One theory is chosen over another. So anyway, that's why the narrator can say what they can say about it.
Ever since science first looked at the heavens and puzzled at what lay beyond, God's unquestioned role as creator has been under attack.
In the Middle Ages in particular, they understood a certain amount of scientific process, and then there was a gap in their understanding, and they understood the next bit. So they said, God did this bit that we don't understand.
The statement that Professor Bell, a very famous astronomer, just made right there is, I can't express to you how utterly untrue it is. The Middle Ages was an absolute explosion of philosophical, theological, scientific, and technological advancements that led right into the Renaissance and right into the Enlightenment. And really a lot of those advancements are what pushed everything along in many ways. The blanket statement she just made is absolutely absurd. Go listen to the series of about 10 lectures I put up when I was teaching at the University of Detroit in 2016 about medieval theology and philosophy, and you will see how utterly ridiculous what she just said is. There were theories of all different kinds of things going on. The theories of certain people saying God controlled all of the mind. Some people saying the mind was just random and spontaneous. Anyway, I could go on and on. I think she just said that because she knows very few people listening to this will go look this up, and she doesn't know. So she's just saying making a guess that in medieval theology, what her comment isn't really very precise. She's essentially saying there was observable things and one wasn't observable God. That's not what she said. I'm trying to help her out because her statement's so incredibly vague. But anyway, enough said. Just go research medieval theology, philosophy, technology, and science. You'll see that she's completely incorrect. I mean, we can just tell from looking at the writings of Thomas Aquinas, Occam, Anselm, and others that they were being attacked by atheist opponents all the time. And that was alive and well. And their writings are the ones that survived. And whoever these atheists were that they were battling, we don't know about, have much information about. But it's very clear that it was a very lively intellectual climate of atheists versus theists, just like today. So anyway, let me continue on.
And then there was a gap in their understanding, and they understood the next bit. So they said, God did this bit that we don't understand. Then as their scientific knowledge increased, the gap narrowed, and God was out of a job.
It's amazing that she just said that comment, and it even contradicts what some of the other participants in this video said at the beginning when they said the mystery has not been eradicated from reality just because of science, and little's been discovered since the Greeks, which I agree with. She's just speaking imprecisely. She just needs to be more careful what she's saying, because we all know that science hasn't closed all the gaps. And we also all know that's not the only place where God is being researched. And anyway, the whole thing is, let me just move on.
Since the Renaissance, science has pushed God back. But not until the 60s did the gaps for which he was needed look like disappearing altogether.
There's the same comment again by the narrator. Not sure why they're doing this, saying this stuff, because you just go find a scientist and ask and say, hey, have the gaps of understanding of what we don't understand vanished altogether, where there's no mysteries and there's no unknowns? And every single scientist will say no. So this is a real sloppy part of this video, and Professor Bell Burnell, this all should just be disregarded, because we all know that. Let's go ask someone what matter is, or what energy is, define them, or what the mind is, or what an atom is, or what a gluon is, or a particle exchange. Or I mean, these are just things I'm thinking off the top of my head. Just go on and on and on and on. How does the genetic code give rise to morphology of a creature? Boom, there's a huge unknown right there. We know it happens, but how? Mystery. So anyway, this is a real sloppy part of this video, so it should all just be disregarded.
The breakthroughs made by astronomers and physicists began to make it seem that scientific inquiry, not the word of God, was the route to absolute truth.
There was a fantastic decade or two in the 1960s, early 70s, where radio astronomy in particular pulled in a number of major discoveries. It was an incredibly exciting time, very heady, and just the kind of circumstances where you might go overboard and think you'd hit absolute truth with capital A and capital T. There were several things that I can recall happening. One was the discovery of pulsars that I was involved with. When we first stumbled over the pulsar signals, we were quite sure there was something wrong with the equipment.
The signal they had come across was unlike anything they had ever seen or heard before. These pulsars were stars more massive than the sun, but smaller than the moon.
This is a great example of, they're talking about pulsars being discovered. These are blinking stars, far, far, far off. And, I mean, they're believed to be stars. It looks kind of like they are, but they're blinking very, very fast. And they have a mathematical pattern to their blinking. And okay, so what do you do with that? You got light that looks like starlight and it's blinking according to a mathematical pattern. Now, astronomers almost never talk about the mathematical pattern, and that should be analyzed. Is there intelligence involved in that? Is it a pattern which is purely random, purely repetitious, or is it changing with a mathematical pattern that shows intelligence? There's a question, virtually never discussed anywhere. But anyway, the point is, so you see blinking light that looks roughly like starlight in the sky. What do? That's all you know. But what they do is they create a theory and they go tell the world, everybody, the theory. What should be said about pulsars is we see blinking light, looks roughly like starlight, and here's the pattern. We don't know exactly what it is, but and that's all we know right there. That's what should be said. But what happens instead? Tell us the theory is the fact, is the discovery. She said it right there. She said we discovered pulsars. And what they say pulsars are you're seeing the pole you're seeing a spinning star where the pole has illuminated beam of light coming out of it. And you're seeing it, you're in the line of the light, but it's rotating around so you just see the light in the blinking area. So, but what if the theory's wrong? I know that it's described like, oh, how could it be wrong? It seems so accurate, and maybe it is right. But what if it's not? Then the theory covers up the truth. And we've seen many, many times where theories change through time. Gravity was first believed to be a force, then it was believed to be a particle/wave. So anyway, theories oscillate. So to believe a theory at any given time is sort of intellectual suicide. To believe an empirical observation is repeatable is enlightenment. So anyway, that's what you see going on here. Believing the theory as if it's fact. You're seeing it unfold right before your eyes here. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, oh, well, the theory's pretty good. It makes a lot of sense. And what else is it going to be? It's exhibiting starlight-like patterns, so how couldn't it be this sort of lighthouse thing where you're caught in the beam of light and seeing it flicker as the light beam streams out of the poles? You can see a pulsar on the top of your page right now. That's from NASA. That would be a drawing, not an actual picture. And look at what they say here. Let me go back. Let me show you the problem here. See where it says the third paragraph. The pulses were so regular, so much like a ticking clock that Bell, that's Professor Bell we just heard from, and her supervisor Anthony Hewish couldn't believe it was a natural phenomenon. So look at that, and now look at this. This is from the journal Science, which can be called, one of the most prestigious science journals in the world, where all the professional scientists want to publish their work. Look at the first sentence of the abstract of this article. Pulsars are famed for their rotational clock-like stability and their highly repeatable pulse shapes. However, it has long been known that there are unexplained deviations, often termed timing noise, from the rate at which we predict these clocks should run. Right there. That right there alone should throw the lighthouse model into question. I'm not saying it's false, but it shoves a wrench into it. Okay, now this article is trying to explain another theory for why there's these deviations, because they're trying to uphold the model and creating a theory to uphold the theory. So anyway, that's the point. We're talking in theory land. We're not talking about actual empirical studies. And this is called science, but it's actually philosophy. And watch as this video progresses, they'll start telling you more about the theory of how these are stars, what kind of stars, superdense stars, blah, blah, blah. Here we go.
The fantastic density of these exotic objects would provide the first clue to where our universe itself had come from. This, not the Word of God, seemed the material of creation now.
It turned out there was nothing wrong with the equipment, and these pulsars are tiny, tiny stars. They're very compact, they're very dense, and they opened up a whole new load of physics.
It seemed the universe was capable of things even Einstein hadn't suspected. One of the men working at this frontier was Roger Penrose. He was convinced that pulsars were only the beginning, and that there were things in the universe that the known laws of physics couldn't explain. Singularities of infinite density, known today as black holes.
Notice that a little while ago, Dr. Bell Burnell said, and the narrator both concurred, that the gaps of non-understanding are vanishing. Therefore, ipso facto, we can infer what they mean is the mysteries are vanishing. And what they just say? Right there, they just said there's areas of space-time that are completely undiscoverable, unknowable, called the singularity. So this video has completely contradicted itself, saying that there are no gaps in understanding, but now there's such gaps that there's areas of the universe we can't even observe or know anything about.
And that there were things in the universe that the known laws of physics couldn't explain. Singularities of infinite density, known today as black holes.
If you have a situation where there's enough material falling together, which in the situation we now call a black hole, Einstein's equations run out, if you like. They come to a place where you can't continue them. The singularities tell you an end to the very notion of space-time geometry as described by Einstein's equation. So it tells us we've got to have something new. That's the end of the physics that we knew before, if we like.
Notice, pay careful attention and notice what Penrose, one of the most famous physicists in history, just said. He just made a claim about the inside of a black hole, the very area that he says the laws of physics can't describe, therefore we have no empirical awareness of. It's a complete unknown, which aren't supposed to exist, of course, because remember the mysteries are, the gaps are vanishing. The big gaps in the Middle Ages are ceasing to exist. Anyway, he just made a claim about them. The claim was the physics of our reality now doesn't exist there, inside of the black hole singularity. How would he know that? He doesn't know that. He's made a completely and entirely philosophical claim. So not only do we now have an area of physics that is completely unknowable, a gap, so to speak, in the words of Professor Bell Burnell, using her incorrect critique of medieval philosophy, theology, and science. But now they're making claims, known claims about the gap. Complete and total. One of the most famous physicists in history just made a complete contradiction. He said there's a unknowable area of reality which I can make a known claim about. It's unknowable, but I know something about it. Pure contradiction that he doesn't even see. See, this is what happens when we put our trust in people. When we trust that people are going to tell us how the universe works and how the world works and the truth of things. This is what we get. We get simple contradictions that aren't even seen.
Penrose wanted to prove that matter could disappear. But in doing so, he inadvertently came across the back door to creation. Because if matter could disappear into nothing, then it was only one bold leap to imagine the reverse, that matter could appear out of nothing, the Big Bang.
There are some puzzling parts of this video, and this is one of them, because they're really going to lay into this concept in this video that scientists believe they're seeing matter emerge out of nothing. That's a debatable claim, whether they are or not. We'll go into that a little bit, what they're seeing later on. I'll have a quote from Paul Davies I'll show you. That'll discuss what they're talking about, particles coming in out of existence out of nothing. But the thing is, though, is I think they think this is a problem for Christianity, because it's well known that Orthodox Church doctrine for many centuries, way back into the first centuries of the church, is that creation of the universe, of the cosmos, by God happened out of nothing. Not out of God, not out of pre-existing material, but out of nothing. Creation ex nihilo. So this video is agreeing completely with that. They're saying the Big Bang. I don't know what they're saying, because in a while they say the particles were created from nothing out of the Big Bang, which doesn't make any sense, because if they came out of the Big Bang, they're not coming from nothing. They're coming from the Big Bang singularity. So I think what they want to say, but they're getting confused, is they want to say the Big Bang singularity comes into existence out of nothing. But if they do say that, they're completely in agreement with church doctrine. So a little bit puzzling. Let's just go on. You'll see as we unfold this that it's very confusing what this video is trying to lay down. If they want to contradict the Bible, what they should be doing is saying there's no origin, there's no creation. Matter always existed. That would be the best thing they could do. But of course, the Big Bang Theory, I'm not saying I'm a believer in the Big Bang Theory at all. Please note that. I'm not going to give my opinion on it, but let me just say, don't count me in as a supporter of the theory. That's all I want to say on it. But the Big Bang Theory is not against creation ex nihilo. So anyway, let's continue.
The work that I did, and then subsequently Stephen Hawking, showed that the same applies when you work your way back to the beginning of time. You find again there is this singular state, and that's the Big Bang singularity.
Okay, follow this closely, what they're doing here. Okay, what we've heard is they're making a big deal that things come from nothing. That's important or something. They haven't described exactly what they mean, where the point of nothing, the start point is. And now what he said, what Penrose just said, is that, you know, if we see the universe expanding and all this, we can run it back in our minds the opposite way, and it all comes from a point. Okay, if it's all expanding, run it back the other way, and it all collapses down to a point. There's a bunch of reasons why they say that. They're all theoretical, but that's the point, is to follow what they're saying so far in the video. That's what they're saying. Okay, so that much is clear so far. And that, to my knowledge, is orthodox Big Bang Theory. Let's continue.
Penrose and Hawking's work was a revolution. They had proved that theory could explain even the beginning of the universe.
Okay, notice they just admitted what we know, that they're saying theory explained the beginning of the universe. So in other words, someone's ideas, not empirical analysis. In other words, not science. And notice they're skipping all the work. They jump from what Penrose just said to, oh, it's a slam dunk, done deal. And it's not even really clear exactly what they're getting at to this point, but in a minute you'll see that they're going with this idea that everything came from nothing, as if that's against the Bible.
Science's next triumph was to find the physical proof. It came unexpectedly. On a clear spring day in 1965, on a hilltop in New Jersey, came an unbidden whisper. Scientists working here at Bell Labs were the first to hear, lost in the roar of the universe, a whisper of the moment of creation. They found their microwave antenna had a persistent hiss. At first they thought it was pigeons living in the horn antenna. Then when they saw the frequency of the sound, they realized this ugly hiss was exactly the frequency theory had predicted the radiation from the Big Bang would have.
Okay, what the video is presenting so far is they're saying, okay, by Penrose's theory, certain concepts about the very, very early universe could be theorized about. One would be such as the temperature of radiation and what the radiation would look like today if the universe stretched out, expanded, in the way it did from then till now. So it would have been radiation all over, still be radiation now, but it would be less dense, stretched out. And what they're saying here is they found it, basically exactly what they were looking for. So Penrose and Hawking theorized that this exists, then a couple years later these guys discover it. Okay, so it looks like, you know, that'd be something substantial. Now this video makes it sound like it's absolutely unquestionable, slam dunk, done deal, and there's any other explanation is almost unthinkable. But look at this article here on your screen. It shows a little different story about this discovery. It wasn't such a slam dunk. It's still today in the process of being confirmed. So this page is the Cornell University Library. The article abstract comes from History and Philosophy of Physics, very well-known physics journal in academia. Here's what the abstract says. And notice this article's only a year old, just over a year old, very up to date. So this isn't like I'm reading something from the 1970s or something. This is very current. Listen to what it says. We historically trace various non-conventional explanations for the origin of the cosmic microwave background, which is that radiation, that was just mentioned as being discussed, and discuss their merits while analyzing the dynamics of their rejection. as well as the relevant physical and methodological reasons for it. It turns out, listen to this, it turns out there have been many such unorthodox interpretations of the radiation, not only those developed in the context of theories rejecting the relativistic Big Bang paradigm entirely, such as by Alfvén, Hoyle, and Narlikar, but also those coming from the camp of original thinkers firmly entrenched in the relativistic milieu by Rees, Ellis, Rowan Robinson, Laser, and Hively. And listen to this. In fact, the orthodox interpretation is only incrementally won out against alternatives over the course of the 3 decades of its multi-stage development. Listen, right there. So what they're saying is, it's still not a done deal that it's interpreted that the microwave background radiation is what Penrose and Hawking said it was. This article is saying that it's believed to be definitely the number one thesis, and the what they're calling the unorthodox alternative explanations are to be rejected. But they're saying, like they said, that's been an incremental process to get to this stage. And this is only a little over a year old, this article. Now, the only substantial point we have so far is that this article disagrees with the video. There wasn't some slam dunk 45 years ago or so where everybody was in consensus about this. That's what so far we found is inconsistent about the video. Okay, so to move on though, this is kind of the same idea as pulsars. We got a theory that's convincing and it blows many people over because of they perceive it as being very convincing, but it still remains in the domain of theory. There's a little bit of that going on. Now, look at this article here. This is from Physics Research International, Remaining Problems and Interpretation of Cosmic Microwave Background. This is this article is about 3 years old. So also not a very old article. Look at the abstract here. By 3 independent hints, it will be demonstrated that still at present there is a substantial lack of theoretical understanding of the cosmic microwave background. Okay, right there. All right, so this is these are 2 professors writing this from Germany. Anyway, let's continue. One point, as we show, is that at the phase of the recombination era, one cannot assume complete thermodynamic equilibrium conditions, but has to face both deviations in the velocity distributions of leptons and baryons from the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution and automatically correlated deviations of photons from the Planck law. That's their first point. And point 2, another point is that at the conventional understanding of the CMB evolution, okay, which comes from Penrose, okay, listen to this. In an expanding universe, one has to face growing cosmic microwave background temperatures with growing look-back times. We show, however, listen to this. We show, however, here that the expected CMB temperature increases would be prohibitive to star formation, to star evolution in galaxies at redshifts higher than z equals 2, where nevertheless the cosmologically most relevant supernova have been observed. Okay, so what this is saying is the star is way out, like at the quasar range, which is the important zone, because that's where supposedly we're looking back into the earlier parts of the universe. You know, some of the initial star formation and so forth. This article is saying that temperatures of the cosmic microwave background are prohibitive to star formation forming at the distant regions, looking back distant into time in the early times of star and galaxy formation. So is this article right and Penrose wrong, or is it the other way around, or are they both wrong, or are they somehow both right and we're only seeing pieces of the puzzle? I don't know. The point is that, you know, we're hearing the video saying, oh, it's a slam dunk, everybody discovered this years ago, And it's kind of like everybody had a big party when they discovered the hiss that they thought was the pigeons. But you start looking into it a little more closely, into the actual academic work that's going on up to the moment in the academic journals, and you find out that there's still a big lively debate going on of what exactly they discovered. And look at the last sentence of their abstract. Thus we come to the conclusion that with the interpretation of the present day high quality cosmic background, microwave background data still needs to be considered carefully. Yeah, that's a nice way of saying that it's still theoretical. This is theoretical. Now you might say, well, everything's theoretical then. When do we go from saying something's theory to fact? Well, the answer to that is when you can see it. The cosmic microwave background is invisible to our human eyes. It's not invisible to human-created apparatuses, apparently. I've never measured it myself, but that's what we're told. And it sounds like people are having difficulty interpreting exactly what is being detected. And that's that. When there's observation problems, that's what happens. People get into debates because they're not sure what they're seeing. Sounds like that's what's really still going on with the cosmic microwave background. So anyway, the point of this video isn't to disprove the Big Bang. I mean, maybe some things said will give the Big Bang problems, but that's not the point. The point is to show the low quality of the video itself.
Is discovering that cosmic microwave background, or the heat or hiss left over, certainly made astronomers much, much more confident that they understood the Big Bang and 15 billion year swathe of the universal history. And certainly for those of us who are astronomers and religious, the question promptly comes up, what was God's role in all this? Or even, did God have a role in all this?
For some, this sound of the background radiation is the sound of God's absence. The picture it produces on a television, a vision of a creation without a creator.
You can sort of see the agenda of the video narrators there, jumping from what's being discussed to somehow saying that this background noise means that we live in a godless universe. That was too big of a jump. We'll discuss that more later. But what I want to discuss more is, notice that what they're measuring is sound. Okay, the microwave radiation, which is a kind of light, they're discovering in terms of sound. This just leads to another very significant issue which has to be addressed, and that is the concept of noise, electrical interference. Can have many different sources, and we have to make sure that there's something else that's not causing this background radiation, which is measurable in every direction. Now, it's interesting that the radiation comes in, supposing that Penrose-Hawking range. I mean, that's just what we're told in the video. I have not investigated that. But there could be many different causes of noise. I've seen people suggest anything from the echo of the sun to atmospheric phenomenon. That's even what the discoverers first thought. They thought it was pigeons. Pigeon activity. So I guess with some of the questions we saw in the two articles I just cited, I don't know, it just kind of smells of the same situation with pulsars, that the theory is people want this control to know, well, we know, we figured it out. And the control sort of gets ahead of the logic, of the rational thoughts, of the empirical, checking things against reality.
Did God have a role in all this?
There's no need to have a creator God who sits around for all eternity planning a universe and then presses a button, makes the Big Bang go bang. We don't need that anymore, and I think it's a rotten idea theologically anyway.
Okay, notice the video is jumping to now Paul Davies being cited as saying we don't need God sitting around for eternity planning things. That's not even the right theological interpretation of Christianity, because he's focused on Christianity. He said earlier in the video that's the religion he's talking about. But okay, my point is that this video really hasn't given us the evidence for this. Just being honest. I mean, be honest if you're an atheist and you're watching my analysis here. The video hasn't broken it down. And now we've got Paul Davies here saying, oh, it's a rotten idea. It's really, in my opinion, maybe you think I'm being picky, but that's not scientific analysis. And that's how I find that the opponents of Christianity talk. They're name callers. They like to throw mud. And rather than throw evidence.
I think it's a good thing we dispose of the God who is there before the universe.
Okay, when I've studied a lot of philosophy of science, all through my master's degree especially, and what he just did, I've read in so many different places, is what you don't do as a scientist. You refrain from giving your opinions. You refrain from having agendas. You only rely on the evidence. The evidence creates your paradigm. It creates your ideology, your worldview. And you don't need to argue for it. You just present it, and it speaks for itself. You don't need to give an agenda, because the evidence is much more powerful than your own agenda. What Davies just did there was present an agenda. Oh, I think we should dispose the idea of the God before the universe. That just makes it look like his whole point is to have an unscientific agenda, is what it makes it look like. With all the science this guy has in the science books he's written, I've got like 4 on my shelf over here. Why isn't he talking about all that? Why is this what's being cited? Maybe the video, he presented a bunch of evidence, and the video makers just showed this one little clip at the end. He had a bunch of evidence before, but regardless, it's just poor on the part of the film. It's just opinion that should be disregarded, since it's without evidence.
So in this modern age, physics has become our satanic tempter, promising to rid us of God and answer all our questions, asking us, why prefer superstition over knowledge? Why blind faith over inquiry?
Okay, lots to discuss here, but a lot of it I already touched on. Blind faith over inquiry. It's actually the opposite. We've already pointed out earlier in this video that science is what involves blind faith. Anybody who says Christianity involves blind faith just simply hasn't read the Bible. So this video is a straw person against Christianity. Go find one verse in the Bible that says blind faith. Go find one verse that shows anything like that, a synonym phrase of that. You won't find it. Do a Google search. It's not there. Go look. What is faith in Hebrews 11:1 in the King James? Evidence. The evidence of the unseen. In the King James, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. The video you just heard just said, implying obviously about Christianity, that it's blind faith. No, it's evidential experience of the spiritual, though. So this video is simply false. It has not even researched Christianity. The whole object of its attack, it has not even researched. Has it all wrong. It's astounding. But then again, that's what happens when people have agendas and want to attack. They develop straw persons. The straw persons, develop a false picture of the opponent and tear down the false picture. That's what's going on here. And if you hear it again, they said, physics will answer all our questions. They're doing the same thing again. Anyway, we already covered that earlier. Let's continue.
Why but to awe? Why but to keep you low and ignorant, his worshippers? He knows that in the day you eat thereof, Your eyes, which seem so clear and yet are dim, shall perfectly be opened and cleared, and you shall be as gods.
So I'm not sure exactly what this video is doing with the multiple references to Satanism and Satan and so forth. Because obviously, if it's the materialistic scientific paradigm, they want to establish there's no spiritual at all. It's only matter. So, but now there's been multiple sort of references to Satan. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of disregard that. I'm not really sure. I would just assume they're just not being literal. And they're just toying around or something. I don't know. But it is true. The Bible would be in agreement with Paradise Lost there, that the object of Satanism is to think that you're the God of yourself, whereas Christianity is the opposite, where God is the Lord of you and you sacrifice yourself, surrender yourself to him in him. So Satanism would be sort of what the world is of humanism, where we think, no, we don't need to lean on God. We can trust our own understanding as our own human understanding. That's all we need to figure things out. And then, so in Proverbs 3:5, it says, lean not on your understanding. So the two are opposites. So that's kind of interesting, but I'm just going to disregard the satanic comments. Just kind of not sure really why. Maybe they're just trying to get the goat of Christians watching. I don't know.
But have the very certainties of science robbed us of what we most desire? A purpose for our lives, a reason for being here.
Deliverance to you. We come out to preach healing to you today. In the name of our Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ, amen. We come out to tell you about the Lord Jesus Christ, amen. And you know what he said to you? He said in the book of Matthew chapter number 28, he said to come unto me all ye that labor, and that heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come unto me all ye that labor, and that heavy laden, and I will give you rest today.
In the past, it was just believed that 6,000 years ago, last Tuesday, God created the universe. And that's the end of it. But we never learn anything there. That's a dead end.
So I'm here to tell you today, don't put your faith in man. Put your faith in the Word of God today.
Every culture has had a cosmology.
That's right.
And it used to be that cosmologists wore robes and were associated with religious things. And now it's the scientists who are the cosmologists. And there is a different way of understanding nature based upon science, based upon experiment, rather than based upon some sort of revealed truth of Scripture.
The gospel according to physics left us on the fringes of creation.
We, on the earth, do not occupy any special position in the universe. We are certainly not at the center of the solar system. We're not at the center of our galaxy, and our galaxy is not at the center of the universe. The universe exists on the basis of the laws of nature, and we are here riding along in the expansion of the universe, and we're here for a few billion years until the sun burns out, and I don't think there's any meaning to that.
That's a lie. That's a lie. It's a lie. It's a spirit of deception. That's a lie. That's a lie. We all need the Lord. We all need him. If you think you can, if you think you don't need him, you're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself.
But do we really have to accept this godless universe? Or is science's claim to victory over God premature? The great breakthrough of the Big Bang theory of the 1970s had been to show that just as matter can collapse in on itself until it disappears into absolutely nothing.
So there's a debate, from what I can know, among professional cosmologists about, did the singularity come from nothing? Was the singularity itself nothing, and therefore still the universe nothing? Which seems empirically false to me. Not being necessarily facetious there, or sarcastic, I guess. So that debate goes on. This video takes the position of almost saying that the singularity was nothing. Or maybe they're saying that the singularity was came from nothing. Well, they're saying one of those two. It's really unclear. They don't define it. But again, to repeat what I said earlier, I guess the makers of this video don't understand that that's in agreement with the Bible and Orthodox Church theology. So I already discussed that a bit. Let me continue. But you're going to hear them talk over the next few minutes about how everything came from nothing, so therefore it's a big victory for science, and now we're in a godless universe. Even though science is the exact same thing, everything came from nothing.
So by simply reversing the equations, matter could spring out of nothing. But the theory left unanswered the deeper question of why there had been a Big Bang at all. All they really had was a theory without a cause.
It's important to understand that the Big Bang theory was around for a long time without any attempt to explain what caused the event itself. So, in the 50s and 60s, when the evidence was piling up in favour of the Big Bang theory, it was considered that the originating event was off limits, that it was simply an event without a cause, that one could say nothing at all about what set the thing off in the first place.
And that's sort of another surprising comment from Davies right there. It doesn't matter if that's true, that people didn't start wondering about the cause of the Big Bang until years after the Big Bang theory was worked out a bit. I mean, you're going to start talking about the cause if you're a scientist, because science is about cause and effect. It's the study of the cause and effects of physical reality and trying to find the repeating patterns empirically, so in order to predict those in the future. So I'm not really sure what the point of that clip there with Davies was, but it's almost like they're saying, oh, that's a problem, that we're looking for the cause of the whole cosmos. So that just didn't make any sense.
So for a while, it seemed the creator God, like some endangered species, would survive in this last gap in our knowledge.
Did you hear that? They said, the narrator just said, this last gap in our knowledge. I think they actually are suggesting here that this is the last gap in our knowledge, the origin of the cosmos. They were just talking earlier in the video about inside black holes, singularities, as being where physics breaks down. And then it was assumed by Penrose that the same physics doesn't exist inside. So there's a gap. I mean, I could think of 50 or 100 or 1,000 more that you're all familiar with. What is the definition of life? What is the Oort cloud ever going to be empirically verifiable? On and on and on and on. And they just said this is the last gap. I don't want to be too vicious here, but that really sort of shows a lot of ineptitude on the part of the makers of this video and those participating. Not trying to be snide by saying that. Is it not true? Who in the world would say that there's only one gap of knowledge left? Or are they just not being literal? I don't know. Let's move on.
So long as the originating event was outside the scope of science, it was always possible to argue that one had to have God to, as it were, light the blue touch paper. I always regarded that as the last refuge of the God of the gaps. If science can't explain something, you wheel God in to offer an explanation.
So they're kind of presenting a reason for God's existence because we have to have a reason for it all. And there's a gap in our knowledge there, so God. Kind of like what Burnell was saying earlier in the video. Because she apparently believes in God, she's a Quaker. But to my knowledge, that's not really a biblical teaching. The Bible, I don't know of any verses that say, oh, the reason we believe in God is because there has to be a reason for everything. It says God created everything. It says God continuously creates everything and all the time, like in Colossians 1:16-17, for example, Revelation 4:11. But so this is kind of out of sync to say that, oh, we have to no God exists because there has to be a reason for everything isn't a biblical teaching at all. Just want to point that out. So to say that, they're kind of comparing it to like it's a reason for the Christian God, or that's a concern for Christians, but it's not, because it's not scriptural.
If science was finally going to close that last refuge of the God of the gaps, scientists needed to investigate what the universe was like when it began. To do that, they needed to find a way of looking much further back in time than they could with any telescope, right back to the very first instant of the universe's existence.
No matter how large of a telescope we build, we can't look out in space, back in time, earlier than 300,000 years after the Bang, because for the first 300,000-year history of the universe was so hot and dense we cannot see through it. So we have to find another way of looking at the early universe. And the way we can do it is to recreate what we believe the conditions of the early universe to be, recreate them in the laboratory. And that's what we do at atom smashers, at particle accelerators.
At particle accelerators, like Fermilab in America, scientists use immense machines to recreate the conditions of the Big Bang.
Now that fellow that was just talking a second ago from Fermilab nicely said, we're trying to create the conditions we believe existed 300,000 years and earlier in the Big Bang cosmos. So that's a little more precise language than some of the other participants in this video have demonstrated. But anyways, so what the narrator just said is they're trying to recreate the conditions of the Big Bang. Now what they're trying to do is they're trying to analyze matter, energy, particulate energy, in extremely high energies, which is what they believe are comparable to the energies of 300,000 years and earlier in the cosmos. That's what they're trying to do now. So there is an assumption here that creating this in the lab creates the same kind of scenario as existed in the very early cosmos. I mean, I think that physicists are aware of this assumption, so I don't need to point out and say, wow, that's a big assumption and a lot of unknowns. I think they get that, and we'd all be in agreement on that. So yeah, that's just what's going on here. But I mean, to bridge this with earlier parts of the video, my commentary, the point is though it's more theory. That's kind of a big one. I mean, are they really the same conditions? A lab? I mean, first of all, the densities aren't the same. You're dealing with a couple little particles in the lab, whereas in the early universe, you've got a sea, if the early cosmos existed, as they say, you've got a sea of super dense particles. They call it a soup often. There's a big, huge difference between the conditions. So what does that mean? I don't know, maybe it means nothing, maybe it means a lot. The point is we don't know. So we're entering theory. There's a lot of theory packed into this. A lot of interesting stuff, but a lot of theory. So anyway, the scientists just kind of go on like they don't point out some of this stuff. And there's other things that can be pointed out too. But let's move on.
Deep underground in the massive Tevatron collider, thousands of supercooled magnets use vast amounts of electricity to accelerate plasma beams of matter and antimatter to almost the speed of light.
When we are running the machine, the amount of our electricity bills run around $1 million per month.
Okay, let's get ready to do a shot.
Once the beams have reached the highest energy levels the magnets can stand, they are collided in this vast particle detecting machine.
PDF is the collider detector at Fermilab. That's what we call this monster detector here. Particles collide in the center of this detector, but actually it would be when it's in there. You can see the places where the beam comes in.
When collisions occur within the detector, it is not fragments of particles that are produced. It is pure energy.
I had to stop and look some things up when I heard them say that it's not particles, it's pure energy, because I didn't know there was such thing as non-particulate pure energy. And I don't know what pure energy means either. I've never seen a definition of pure energy. Usually people say pure energy is the Big Bang before it started expanding. But that's, as we heard Penrose say, that's where the laws of physics break down. So there's nothing that can be said. It's undefined. It's an infinity. It's not, nothing is known about it other than it's an infinity, or, you know, things like that. So just being honest, I think you should disregard what was just said. I think scientists would agree also that that was a meaningless statement to say it's not particles, it's pure energy. And it is particles. Way back to the early seconds of the universe, they're theorizing the existence of particles, even though it's not observable.
All tuned up. Let's take a shot.
At Fermilab, we can create energies that were present in the universe 4 picoseconds after the bang, 4 millionth of a second after the bang.
Now, he's explaining that as if it's fact, but of course it's a theory. Nobody's seen back to that point in the universe. So what he should be saying is, according to our theories, we think this is the energy at 4 picoseconds, so therefore we can create this in the lab with just a couple individual particles rather than a very, very incredibly dense soup of particles. That's what should be said, but he didn't say that.
When the temperature was a gazillion degrees, it's the numbers are so large or so small that it's sort of beyond our everyday experience.
Extracting antiprotons. Caustic beam in a main injector.
At such extreme temperatures, in line with the strange laws of quantum mechanics, the energy takes on the form of the primordial particles of the Big Bang.
Beam in the tevatron.
In effect, the scientists are forcing into existence the very first things which existed in our universe.
Initiating collisions.
If the scientists can recreate conditions like the Big Bang, in which matter appeared out of nothing, what need for a creator?
Again, so that's what's really making me scratch my head right there. They're saying if particles can be created out of nothing in the lab, why do we need a God? Well, the particles aren't being created out of nothing by the minds of the physicists. It would be the process of reality, that whatever is built into reality doing it, if that's what's happening. There's a lot of speculation to get to that point to say that they're being created out of nothing. But let's go with that, since that's the clear position this video is taking. Now, the point is, though, when I say it's the process of reality, that means the particles are coming from nothing. That's a supernatural activity. Unless they give us some clear, real, simple, and uncomplicated explanation for how particles are coming into existence out of nothing in this video, which so far they have not. I am completely at liberty to go in with the past 2,500 years of intellectual thought and concluding, which is the consensus among that last 2,500 years, that something from nothing is a supernatural activity. And that would be therefore created by God. So if they're creating particles out of nothing, if that's what's happening, again, speculative, but if that's what's happening, God is doing it. Unless they can tell me in the video some clear mechanical process which shows otherwise, I've got the better thesis than they do. And in this video, they like to say there's lots of people, intellectuals lining up to question God and stuff. Well, I can say the same thing. I can say I have a mile-long list of intellectuals over the past 2,500 years who would agree in saying something out of nothing is a supernatural act. Their supernatural is a denotation of the creator that supposedly this video says is killed. But this video would actually be supporting the existence of a creator. As we already said, since church doctrine for almost 2,000 years has been creation ex nihilo.
In effect, this is an experiment for replacing the blue touch paper God. What Fermilab does is examine our universe in the instance after the Big Bang, when the universe was entirely governed by quantum mechanics.
Okay, earlier you heard the physicists from Fermilab say that it's believed the conditions created in Fermilab are the same as the Big Bang, or the early universe. 4 picoseconds he referred to. The video you just heard say right there bypassed that concept of we believe the conditions are the same. The video's narrator is now assuming it, or I should say concluding it as fact and telling the audience such. Now, I've already pointed out some very significant condition differences between Fermilab and the very early universe. I'm sure there's others. And it's all entirely theoretical that we even know what's going on back then. Anyway, I'm repeating myself. Just want to point out that the video is now telling you that theory is fact.
But in pushing their understanding all the way back, scientists contributed to a major theoretical breakthrough. They realized the nothing, the very void from which our universe sprang, is itself governed by the same bizarre principles of quantum mechanics.
This is an astounding issue right here for two reasons. One, the more obvious thing is, I don't need to belabor this because you see the obvious contradiction. They're calling nothing something, which is a contradiction. They're saying nothing has features, quantum features. So they're not really talking about nothing. I don't know what they're doing, actually. This is all getting kind of scrambled like a word salad or something. Now, much more interesting, much more interesting, it's so interesting, is that this video just contradicted something that was said earlier, which I pointed out. Roger Penrose said that inside a black hole, physics breaks down, and there's a new physics. We don't know anything about it, but I can make a known comment about it. So he contradicts himself. Remember that? What did you just hear stated right here? They just said the same physics governs the earliest point. Now, they said earliest. I don't mean the earliest. I mean 4 picoseconds, which there's a lot that happened before that. But anyway, the earliest known is what they should have said. Well, that's right. So that contradicts what Penrose said earlier. There is no new physics. The same physics exists because it was a singularity. It's still, there's so much density that's still going to be beyond the point of being a singularity. Again, that's the whole debate about why did the singularity expand? What was the force that made that happen? Just put that on the shelf for now. This is still in the density over what would cause a singularity, obviously, at 4 picoseconds, far above it. And they're saying they theoretically know the physics, and it's now not a new physics. It's not the breakdown of the laws of physics. It's the same physics. So everything in this video just Penrose just said all the opposite earlier in the video when he said physics breaks down, new physics, and there's nothing known about it. So this video is contradicting itself in several ways now.
A theoretical breakthrough. They realized the nothing, the very void from which our universe sprang, is itself governed by the same bizarre principles of quantum mechanics.
The picture of nothing is very different in the 20th century than the picture of nothing before the advent of quantum mechanics.
I'm not sure why physicists do this. This is why physicists need to be philosophers too, like professionally trained academic philosophers. Because this doesn't make any sense. Nothing doesn't change. There's not like there's this nothing and then, unless they're not referring to nothing, referring to a vacuum or something, which is emptiness, like an empty container. But this is just poor analysis, and physicists do this all over the place. What they mean by nothing isn't nothing. They mean something. Because if they were talking about pure nothingness, non-being, there's nothing that can be said about it because it has no properties. So there's no properties you can refer to. So this is just confusing analysis that physicists do. I think that leads to a lot of their problems. The way they describe causation, space, nothing, you can go on a whole big list of the conceptual things they add in. And they're not, they always are, I hear so often physicists ridiculing philosophers. Well, I think that's what they need as philosophers. That's, of course, where I'm not just saying that because that's my academic background, teaching philosophy for 13 years. It's really true. Listen to what this guy's saying. How can nothing change? I can even refer to nothing. Say it like it is. We're talking about nothing. You're talking about something. He's talking about some kind of vacuum space or something.
One of the basic tenets of quantum mechanics is a principle of uncertainty, named the uncertainty principle by Werner Heisenberg. And because of the uncertainty principle, energy can be violated for a brief instant of time. So at any point in space, it's possible for a particle and antiparticle to pop out of the vacuum, existing for a brief instant, violating in some sense conservation of energy for an instant, before they annihilate and go back into the vacuum. So if you could see nature on microscopic scales, you would not see a quiescent space, but what you would see would be a quantum foam, a frothing of particles and antiparticles popping out of the vacuum and then annihilating again.
So did you hear what he just said there? He said popping out of the vacuum and then annihilating again. This is a very common thing for physicists to do. They assert this sort of metaphysical space where particles come into and out of and retreat back to, like an energy field or something. So this isn't nothingness. That's why I didn't want to instantly think that the physicists are agreeing with the Bible, because they're not talking about the same thing the Bible's talking about. But what they're talking about is completely metaphysical. They have no observational analysis they can show you on this. It's just merely dreamed up. There's a lot of theory. I mean, a lot of theory to get to the point to be able to say what this guy just said. I'm not exaggerating about that either. And there's a lot of physicists out there too that agree with me and say this is all just way too metaphysical. You go down to your local university and start talking to some of the physicists and start talking to them in these terms, all these metaphysical terms, and a lot of them are going to say, you know what, I don't like it. A lot of them will say these are the guys that get the big press at talking all the fantastical terms, but it's not what we're seeing. It's a lot of theory, and we just do experimental work on studying the energies of reality, which we don't really understand. That's the physics. When I was getting my master's degree, I would stop in the philosophy department a lot. And when I was doing PhD work also, I was not quite as involved with the physics department, but a bit. That's what they would say. That's why I'm getting this information. That's what they would say. They would try to distance themselves from the pop physics out there, like you're hearing in this video. So, but to repeat, everything you just heard him say is simply something somebody dreamed up in a room. Nobody ever saw this. This is not a discovery he's talking. Nobody's ever seen the foam, the quantum foam. They see one particle at a time in particle accelerators. And all this foam is all just theory.
So before the Big Bang, there was nothing. There was no space and no time, no universe. There was no before and no after.
Christian critics of theoretical science, like myself, have made a lot of note of errors like what he just said. He just made claims about not only a singularity, which supposedly earlier in the video we couldn't do. He's now going before that, before the Big Bang singularity, and telling us specific claims about it. I mean, he should preface these comments by saying, I have no evidence for what I'm saying. This is completely, I have nothing I can show you. It's just metaphysical dream. There's more evidence for the unicorn I saw in my dream than there is for this.
Then, because of quantum uncertainty, an expanding bubble of vacuum came into being.
So I don't know why physicists do this, and because these are supposed to be the great titans of materialist atheist reality, right? Well, he's talking more metaphysical terms than the Christian does here. And then he proposes to tell us what he did about the expanding bubble. Again, all the same comments apply. There's no evidence for any of this. If this is what's used to say that they've killed the creator in this video, obviously Christians have nothing to worry about. We knew we didn't anyways, but because we have proof for God's existence. What the proof is, we can experience him, we experience his presence.
this expanding bubble of vacuum grew to enormous size, and that is the entire universe that we see.
What particle accelerators have helped confirm is that the Big Bang did not need a supernatural cause.
Okay, no, they've said that over and over in this video. The Big Bang proves God wasn't needed. How? We need a breakdown, a clear, here's the first piece of evidence, step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing. We haven't gotten anything except the fiat claim. Big Bang means no God needed.
The void from which our universe sprang is in fact made of energy, positive and negative, in perfect balance. And why the Big Bang should have violated this balance is because nature at the quantum level can and does suffer the uncertainty of random events.
Okay, so the narrator just said nature, the cosmos, is a perfect balance of positive and negative energy. So the charge is net zero. I think that's what they mean by nothingness. I've seen physicists do that many times, say the universe is nothing because the charge is zero. So obviously that's not what nothing is. They are playing games, or I don't know what they're doing. That's not right. Nothing means zero, not something that is without like then a neutron is a nothingness, right? The zero charge particle. Anyways, who knows? But then they say, why was there an imbalance then in this perfect balance? And that's why we have the universe. So there's a perfect balance. They had an imbalance. Hence, you're here. I don't think that's being responsible in describing things. This is not responsible academic analysis. This is theoretical agenda. Responsible academic analysis has logical steps, defined terms, clarity for how one inference leads to another, and experimental data to support.
And more startling still, the scientists said nothing could precede that moment. So the Big Bang, the moment of creation, was just one random event in a timeless nothing.
If you lined up 100 professional philosophers in a room and asked them the statement, one random event in a timeless nothing, if they could describe what that is, I would very confidently say that none of them would even try to, and they would all say it's absurdity.
The Big Bang was not the explosion of a lump of something in a pre-existing void. It was the origin of space and time, as well as matter and energy.
Davies here, one of the most famous physicists in the world, doesn't have evidence for these claims. He doesn't know that, what he just said, because he can't see outside of... If you could go back and observe our universe from that vantage point, which you can't, you couldn't see outside of it. According to their model of the cosmos, you can't see outside of it. So how can he tell us that it wasn't in another container of space that had other matter and energy? So this is a nonsense claim, more pure, undisciplined, wild metaphysics. This video is sort of getting more and more outlandish as we go here. Not trying to be snide and do name calling. I'm trying to be very rational. This is getting to be irresponsible.
When people say, well, what happened before the Big Bang? The answer was nothing. Nothing, simply because there was no time before the Big Bang. Time itself didn't exist. Stephen Hawking has said it's a little bit like saying what lies north of the North Pole. Again, the answer is nothing, not because there's some mysterious land of nothing there, but because there ain't no such place as north of the North Pole. Well, in the same way, there ain't no such time as before the Big Bang.
Like I said, this is getting really irresponsible and outlandish. If you're standing at the North Pole and you look up, you're not looking at nothingness, you're looking at the Earth's atmosphere. I mean, I would think you would know this, so I don't know if why he's got the bad analogy here. And who says Stephen Hawking himself wrote a book called Black Holes and Baby Universes, which talks about universes coming into existence inside of other universes. And that's what some of the black holes in our universe can be. They can be baby universes. They'll start expanding at some point in the future and form other universes. So if that's true, then according to their models, universes can come into existence in pre-existing space-time matrices. So I guess Paul Davies hasn't read Stephen Hawking's book and isn't aware of that theoretical analysis. So the theoretical analysis here among physicists is all clashing.
The Big Bang was the emergence of time itself. And when you ask the question, what came before or what came after, you have in the back of your mind some picture of time is smoothly flowing. But if the Big Bang was really the emergence of the universe, the very beginning of the universe, it's also the very beginning of time itself. The very beginning of time itself. Time itself. Time itself.
As strange and counterintuitive as quantum mechanics is, scientists have subsequently been able to check everything the theory predicted with practical observations. Nothing was needed to set the universe going.
Not sure why they just said that, because that's not true. It is well known that quantum physics is a well-confirmed scientific discipline, but that's at sort of more ordinary energies. We're talking about 4 picoseconds of the supposed birth of the Big Bang cosmos. That's not confirmed at all. That's completely unconfirmed. It's only theoretical. So that the video is incorrect in the statement they just made. I think they're trying to say that the well-confirmed quantum mechanical research of the present day with particle accelerators is therefore showing the well-confirmed discovery of things about the early universe, and the two are not the same. We would have to see further back in time through telescopes to be able to confirm that what we believe about the early universe, or what they believe about the early universe, is correct, to know that they're seeing the same thing in the particle accelerators. But as was already stated in the video, you can't see that far back because apparently you can't see. Apparently, if you look at a telescope, you see a wall. If you look back far enough, a wall, so to speak, that you can't see through, a wall of light or something. And you can't see any further back in time. I don't know. That's what was said earlier by the Fermilab fellow when he said we can't see through the universe past 300,000 years after the Big Bang because it's too dense.
No blue touch paper, no creator God. Is this good news or bad?
I'm really quite delighted that the originating event of the universe, the Big Bang itself, can now be discussed entirely within the scope of physics, that we don't need to appeal to anything peculiar about setting the thing off. This is a positive step here, because step number one is let's get rid of the ultimate god of the gaps, the god who presses the button and makes the Big Bang go bang. We don't want that sort of god. We don't want a god who makes the universe as a supernatural act at time t equals 0. So that's a great step forward. Then the question is there any room for God at all?
The scientists trying to prove that there don't exist a God, that all of a sudden everything that we see and do came about by Big Bang theory, so to speak. But how to get those laws, the laws and the gravity and all that kind of stuff, where those laws came from? I mean, they based their laws on what somebody else gave. So who gave them the law?
I don't mean to say anything disrespectful to this fellow who's just talking there. I don't know if he's a police officer or what. But it's interesting that that's the opponent view that this video presents. They don't present someone like myself, someone who's got a academic background, for example. If they did let the opponent view be presented, the video would show weaknesses.
That was the point. Quantum mechanics might replace the God who rested on the seventh day. But how could a random fluctuation of energy, deliver a universe with everything just right to produce human consciousness.
Who put it together? Can they explain that? I doubt it.
Thank you.
All right, y'all take it easy. Have a good day.
Well, that's a good point in a sense. Yeah, I mean, where science has pushed these problems is not so much in the creation, but in the actual nature of the equations, the nature of the laws that we have, the quantum mechanics that we have, and so on. It's all very intricately constructed and extraordinary. When you look at these things, you come across them. When you finally learn, what it is that makes things behave in one way or another, we find these amazing mathematical laws which govern them. We'd never have thought of them otherwise. They're just fantastic. Now, that's where we are now. We don't know why the laws are of the form they are. Maybe we'll come to a better understanding later on. So if you like, the God problem has got pushed from one place to a deeper place.
Roger Penrose there is again giving a different opinion than the narrators of this video and many other people in this video. He apparently disagrees with the idea that physics is pushing out need for God. He's holding the view that it displaces or moves the problem of God to a different place. The third view would be someone like myself who thinks that science doesn't touch the problem of God. The problem of God in ancient Greece or at 100 AD or today is all the same problem, and science has had no effect.
By the end of the 20th century, scientists had an almost complete understanding of the fundamental particles and forces, which describe nearly perfectly how a creatorless universe works.
I have to close this video out today. I've run out of time, and this was sort of a one-day thing that I could work on this. I will not be able to continue tomorrow, so I have to stop there. There's about 10 minutes, I think, or so left in this video, and they were changing course to talk about the anthropic principle and so forth, I believe. Let me just close by saying something very important, that science, as I referred to earlier in the video, is a dominator paradigm, or a master narrative, as postmodernists say. Let me read you a page from this book, Postmodernism, the Key Figures, of analysis of the philosopher Gilles Deleuze, which very accurately describes what science has become. As I said earlier, science essentially is doing what they're accusing Christianity of doing in the past. They're saying we've got the right information, other forms of information are not justified compared to ours. All other information has to sort of elevate to our status, and you don't have the right to have an opposing opinion. And we have the right to say we're correct and your information is inferior. Precisely what science is, interestingly. And let me read this analysis from the book Postmodernism Key Figures, page 100. Sorry that's all highlighted up and so forth. I used this when I was teaching at the University of Detroit, and I was very excited about this, obviously, so I marked it up a bit. But let me just read it here, starting right at the top, yellow there. Here, I'll zoom in a bit. Crucial for Deleuze and Guattari is the difference between subjected groups whose identities are prescribed by existing power formations and subject groups which produce new social relations through unpredictable metamorphoses of power configurations. Okay, so science is the subject group, and the subjected groups are those who are the victims of the master narrative. I say victim because it's the master narrative is unverifiable. As you've seen in this video, it's all theoretical. So it's the subjected group is the victim of the human imagination. It is oppressed by imaginal tyranny. So let's go down the page a little bit. So science also represents what Deleuze and Guattari want to say is what capitalism is like. You can take the same thinking and apply it on the master narrative of science, the theoretical science. So let me read this part here. Such an analysis of capitalism might imply foundational ontology, but in this regard, Deleuze and Guattari are simply following a strategy common to many postmodern thinkers. that of simultaneously asserting and undermining master narratives, critiquing old accounts and inventing new with an ironic recognition of the constructual nature of their own models. Deleuze and Guattari thought their thought is resolutely anti-foundational, for in their view philosophy is always a matter of inventing concepts, not a matter of representing truth. There is no truth that doesn't falsify established ideas. To say that truth is created implies that the production of truth involves a series of operations that amount to working on a material, strictly speaking, a series of falsifications. See, many scientists, they're very vocal about being very against postmodern philosophy. But science is a lot of why postmodern philosophy came about, because it led to falsification. That's what, as you saw here, postmodernism is based on. So science is a master narrative imposed on subjective groups.